with a little background about professional partnering solutions. We are the leading resource for agencies that are interested in developing or enhancing their supplier diversity efforts. We have the privilege of working with agencies that represent some of the world's leading brands. We have a staff of industry professionals with a winning track record in supplier diversity, and we work with both creative and media agencies. The firm was started, actually, I was hired as the first director of supplier diversity at GSB&M a number of years ago, when I was then asked by Chrysler if I would help BBDO Detroit establish their initiative. I came to GSB&M, and at the time I had 15-plus years of experience in supplier diversity in both the private and government sectors, and had been an entrepreneur before. And seeing the opportunity to establish a firm again, I asked both CEOs if they would support me as an independent contractor. They agreed, and the firm was launched. We have the privilege now of representing agencies within 3 of the 4 major holding companies. We have an embedded model where we have professionals on site working with the agencies and their departments, working with their clients and their vendors to develop and create custom solutions to help their clients meet their goals. We tend to be a little different than your traditional consultant, as we are not traditional in our methods. We're not constricted by historical approaches. We tend to try and be, at least, as creative as the agencies we serve, nor do we really serve as external advisors, because we're there engaged with the day-to-day business practices. In some cases, we actually have people on site with buying authority. We have signature authority for many clients' budgets, and we're known for not being very passive in the way that we approach supplier diversity. And as I mentioned, and as many of you know that are engaged in supplier diversity, oftentimes you are a bridge between the client, the agency, and the vendor, and really understanding the expectations and the needs of each of these buckets. That's what helps us to be very effective. These are some of the agencies that we either currently work with or have had the pleasure of working with, and some of the brands that we've developed solutions for. We are launching our app, which will be out within the next couple of weeks. And it again is a way to engage our vendor communities more, because what we found working internally and doing most of our work with internal staff, and although we do a lot of vendor partnering, it's very hard when you're, and I think people in supplier diversity can appreciate this, when you're a party of 1 or 3 internally, and you're trying to really stay connected with thousands of vendors. And so we're taking the 10,000 plus database that we've established over the number of years and launching our app, and also as a way to really be able to get the word out about opportunities at the agencies we serve. And so we're going to be launching that through our Access brand, and it's been developed by our ICANN app team. And now for what you all signed up to hear about. And we thought in discussing this with Connie, and as a result of some work that we had done in California with the AAS, that we needed to maybe take a step back to really establish what is being asked of agencies from their clients, and what are really the client's expectations, and then what do agencies need to have in place. In addition, we often find that this is really approached oftentimes as a compliance effort, because reporting is being requested, when it really takes so much more than that. So hopefully in this presentation, we'll have the opportunity to address what it is that your clients are looking for, what agencies need, where they can go to find help, and what are best practices that exist, and then leaving a lot of time at the end for any questions that you may have. And I encourage you to go ahead and submit your questions along the way. At the end of the presentation, we have both Aline and Tanya that will be fielding the questions along with folks over at the AAS. I'll be online to answer those, and then, hey, follow me on Twitter for those questions that we don't have a chance to get to. But just to really establish who and what we're talking about today, because I know there's a lot of excitement around the word vendor, the word supplier, and I just want to say that for today's discussion, the term vendor is really referring to those companies that provide goods, services to agencies. So I'm not really talking about multicultural agency partners as such. And when I say vendor, I mean both vendors that provide creative services or media outlets and media outlets. When I refer to client, I'm really talking about the advertiser, first tier, which is a term that you will hear often, and you may hear it from your clients. First-tier vendors are nearly those vendors that are paid directly by a company. Second tier are the vendors that are paid by the first-tier vendors, and hence you get the term, and then it continues, third, fourth, and through M-tier. And so when advertisers are asking for expenditures of their agencies, it's usually through their second-tier efforts, but they are the agency's first-tier vendors. Okay? Also the term MBE, or minority-owned, and we hear oftentimes in the industry women-owned vendors referred to as minority-owned or minority vendors, but really as it relates to supplier diversity, minorities are ethnic minorities that, and then the companies are at least 51% owned, managed, and controlled by ethnic minorities. Women-owned vendors are women-owned businesses that are at least 51% owned, managed, and controlled by women. And those other factors are as important as the shares. And so that's why certifications such as the National Minority Supplier Development Council and the Women's Business Enterprise National Councils are the ones that you see accepted most widely among the corporations because of the on-site visits that they do to validate that the vendors or the ownership consists of people that are owned, managed, and that they have control of the business. And for the purposes of today's discussion, my agency reference will be refers to general market agencies, because those are primarily the agencies we work with, one, and the ones that are the agencies of record for many of the clients, and not that multicultural agencies are not, but it's just for the purposes of this conversation, we're referring to and addressing general market agencies. And just to take you quickly through the evolution of diversity in U.S., what started as an affirmative action effort and then went into equal opportunity and access discussions is now really more about value and competency. This is not a benevolent initiative in any way, nor is it some type of entitlement. It's really about being more reflective of the communities and of the population, and we'll talk more about that. And for those agencies that are really sensing that their clients are not giving them enough time, or are really being quite maybe demanding in their request for expenditures, this can help you see why. I mean, this conversation about diversity in advertising has been taking place now for 50 years. So this is not really anything new. Within the past 18 months, though, we have seen more awareness, shall we say, and more interest in actually demanding compliance on behalf of the agencies. But keep in mind, many of the corporations have had initiatives in place since the 60s. So supplier diversity isn't new. And it's just something now, and I think largely because advertising and marketing is something that was procured outside of procurement, and traditionally within the private sector, supplier diversity has been tied to supply chain or procurement. It has just really gone untapped. But now we're seeing more procurement professionals involved in agency contracts, and thereby we're really seeing more of an enforcement of the supplier diversity requirements, and rather than enforcement, let's just say sharing of values, shall we? And that's a good thing, because there is a very big vendor community out there that really is very interested in working with the agencies, and this oftentimes provides them access in a way to do that. The other thing that we've run into is that when we speak about supplier diversity, it turns oftentimes into a talent or a workforce discussion. Again, though, for the purposes of this conversation, we're really focused on supplier. We recognize and acknowledge that workplace or talent solutions exist, community initiatives, and even targeted media initiatives. But this dialogue is about supplier diversity, and when we speak about it from a media perspective, we're talking about media that's owned. And so why is this important? Why is this important to clients? Well, let's just look at AT&T as an example, given that they were named NMSCC's Corporation of the Year in 2010. When AT&T contracts with a minority-owned vendor, historically, and there is empirical data that supports the fact that minorities and women tend to hire minorities and women. And so the people that they hire, the employees, then spend in their community. Well, then that empowers them to buy more goods and services from an AT&T. And so you have a multiplier effect. And it really is enriching lives and enriching communities. And people get tired of probably hearing me say this, but I do like to say, because I think workplace and workforce initiatives are very important. I mean, I got my start as an employee, so I don't discount the importance of that. And it's great because it provides you an opportunity to support and provide for your family. And when you support businesses, you really give that business owner an opportunity to provide and support for their community. And so it's about self-empowerment. And, you know, and here's a large reason why this is important. It's important for the clients and therefore important to the agencies. I mean, in many states in the U.S., we're finding that minorities are the new majority. So then, having said all of that, and when you look at supplier diversity, what exactly are the clients asking for, and what are they expecting from their agencies? And I wish I could really just give you a slide that answers that for everyone, but it's really, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, not that simple. It really varies by client, and it's based on their individual second-tier efforts, and it's really based on their culture and what they value as a corporation. But what we've been seeing is that the initial request for expenditures is around 5%, and it can grow from there. I mean, we've seen, you know, as much as 21% requested, and then those of you that are government contractors are familiar with the government small business requirement even of 23%. So it really varies. But this average of 5% relates to the private sector, and, you know, don't be surprised, though, if it's more based on what you do for that particular client. And there is a difference between supplier diversity or MWBE initiatives, minority and women-owned business initiatives, and small business initiatives, which are more government-focused. The best practice, and this is always a great, an interesting dialogue that we have with our agency partners, is, is it against out-of-pocket costs, or, is it against total? And I use billings here if there are any finance people on the call and really talking about cash receipts, because what that client is looking at, those that apply this particular practice, they are saying the dollars that we pay you, that we pay the agency, we would like X percent against those dollars. And that's the way they look at it internally as well. And so that's why it's against everything. And I know this becomes a challenge for many agencies where the business model, has been tied to labor and hours very often. But it is, one of the requirements and best practices, and typically your fees are a part of the equation. Then the other thing that a client may ask for is for that vendor to be certified. And I've seen it where agencies will send out a blanket email or an email blast or a letter to the vendors asking them to become certified by NMSDC. But keep in mind, that particular certification may not apply to all of your vendors, as it is just for minority-owned vendors. There's a certification for women-owned. And if you have state or local government business, they have their own certifications. And, I'm often asked, well, why is that? Why isn't there just one? And those of us that have been in this for many years, you remember the Adirondack decision, which really dictated that government initiatives have to be narrowly tailored. And so they then they conduct a disparity study, which then tells them what groups of people should fall within their initiative, and then their certification is a way to validate that they are and do have an initiative to help those groups that have been historically underutilized, hence where the term comes from. And in the private sector, it's a bit different, as many of the major advertisers anyway are either members of or support NMSDC and WeBank. And then exclusions. Agencies will often ask for exclusions, but they are typically not permitted in a best practice scenario. So, things like excluding talent or excluding media, they're generally included because they're part of the dollars that the agents or that the advertisers pay the agency. And one of the reasons is that when the client launched their initiatives, they help develop vendors in the spaces where there were none. So that is the expectation that they have of the agencies as well. And then after all that's been done, there's the reporting process. And I always say, reports are just a way to measure and report on the progress that has been made of your initiative. So it's not, the report is not the initiative, but it's just a way to measure the success of your initiative. And so, clients can ask for that on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis. And then the really full supplier diversity engagement is desired. Although many agencies will take the client-specific approach, we just say from a vendor perspective, you may want to really consider that approach and be very cautious in taking that approach, because when you have a great vendor that you're using, the expectation from the vendor side is that if they do a good job, they'll be able to work with the different brands that you represent, and not only just the one brand that has the supplier diversity requirement. And oftentimes, depending on how this is communicated, there could be some misunderstanding internally about the intent and the expectation to share that vendor. And then when you look at agency best practices, I mean, you have to have the support of your C-suite, the CEO, CFO, and COO, the account directors and supervisors are very important. The supervisor becomes my best friend because they control the budget and can help me with, what plans are for that particular client and where the expenditures will be. Client goals and reporting, and so, clients often ask, well, or actually state that agencies should really embrace this even without the client requiring it. And although I understand that and probably shared that point of view before really getting involved with advertising agencies, when you really look at the fact that agencies are in business to support their clients and that everything they do is really on behalf of their clients, it then, I think, stands to reason that this has to be something that's desired by the client as well. And oftentimes those agencies that are really best in class at this, will often introduce it or offer it to clients because they have the infrastructure and they have the successful track record. And then experienced supplier diversity staff. I mean, it's just really critical in this business because an understanding of agency operations, supply chain, and then some finance knowledge goes a long way in being able to hit the ground running. You can always develop the talent in-house, and it's been my experience just training multiple professionals in this. I could take a couple years to develop. So experience is the key, especially if you have something that you really need to respond to very quickly. An outreach plan, I know that especially with media, you're accustomed to having the vendors come in and court. And keep in mind, in an industry where the access hasn't necessarily been that open, vendors may not know where to go, and oftentimes we find ourselves having to court those that are very good, or if they've tried in the past and not been successful, then, as a vendor, you want to be, you have to look at where you spend your resources, and so generally you go after those areas where you think you have the greatest opportunity. So it's important that the vendors know that your doors are open and that you're really looking for them to do business with. Development, it's an expectation, guys. I know it's not the business that you believe that you're in, but I think if you really, really look at it and think about those vendors that you started with early in your career and you've watched them grow and probably have helped them grow to that some aspect because of the relationships that exist, I think you'll see that you are supporting vendor development. An agency-wide effort is also critical to success. And so, I wanted to leave at least 30 minutes for Q&A, but that's really just to provide you with a snapshot, high-level kind of insight into supplier diversity for advertising, media, marketing, and communications. And feel free to contact us at professionalps.com, and like I said, after this session, if we don't get to all of your questions, you're welcome to follow me on Twitter. Hey, gang, do we have any questions?
Anita, thank you so much for your remarks. It's others here. One of the first questions was, what is your Twitter handle there on the page? We have a question from Sherry, who has an excellent question. She wants to know, what's the best way to bridge the diversity education gap between the diversity of the manager at an agency or advertiser and the advertising decision maker? Many times it seems that the two sides don't communicate. She'd love to get your feedback.
Well, Eileen, we all found that to be very entertaining. I need you to turn off your microphone on your computer or hang up the phone because I couldn't understand what you said. Can someone read the question to me?
Okay.
There you go.
Sorry about the feedback.
Okay, the first question was from Sherry. She wanted to know what is the best way to bridge the diversity education gap between the diversity supplier manager at an agency or an advertiser and the decision maker, the account director or traffic director of the agency. Because many times, from her experience, it seems like there are communication gaps and challenges. She'd love to know your thoughts on that.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Elaine, and thank you, Sherry, for the question. And we run into that a lot, and I think has really attributed to our success, because what we find is that everyone's speaking a different language. And I actually did a presentation for clients on that. When you say this, they hear that. And really understanding the supplier diversity manager's expectations and requirements is very critical. And you'll oftentimes have to ask them a lot of questions and maybe even educate them on your business. Because if you look at the fact that, I don't know, let's just say, for example, they're a food and beverage client, that's the business that they're in, not advertising, right? And they're being courted by agencies and probably some either supportive services vendors that are interested in working on their business. So they're trying to introduce them into your supply chain, if you will. And you serve kind of in a role, you're an evangelist, you're an account manager as such, you're a translator oftentimes. And so we found building that relationship internally, which if you're working internally, you already have. And Elaine, is she in the supplier diversity role, or is she inside the agency? Can you tell?
I think she's in the supplier diversity role.
Oh, okay. Well, oftentimes the agency, and if I can speak for the agency, they don't really understand what you're asking for. And it's really sincere. I've seen supplier diversity people come in with a lot of procurement-related terms that are not necessarily the terms that are used internally at the agency. And it's really hard to have the discussion without really understanding their business. So I think taking a step back to find out what they do, what brand managers inside your corporation they work with, really understanding what services they provide. Because if some corporations have 20-plus agencies that they work with, and they each, they're providing different types of services. So there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. Some may be more labor-based with very little opportunities. Others, a smaller team with a lot more outsourcing opportunities. So I think first understanding what that agency does and then how they do it is really critical before making the introduction.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions?
We have a question from an MBE who wondered, with his experience in bidding on government contracts, wondering if it's possible for more than one MBE to be included in some of the proposals. That sometimes it seems so specific that this is from Daniel, that it seems as if only one vendor could succeed at a time. Wondering if there are ways that multiple vendors can be included and multiple vendors can get an opportunity to participate with advertisers.
I don't know that I fully understand the question and how experience responding to government bids relates to that, but I don't think anyone intentionally writes the bid that way, so that unless he's talking about when it comes from the client and that they're looking for one agency of record for a specific service, and if that's the case, that's typically how it's done to protect, the creative element of the work. But I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I hope that my response at least helps or provides some insight. Any more? Tanya, Phil?
Well, here's a question, Anita. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. That says, from a participant today, what is the best way to bridge the diversity education gap between the diversity supplier manager at an agency or advertiser and the advertising decision maker, be it business affairs, the account director, traffic director at the agency or advertiser? The two don't seem to communicate.
Right, Tanya, and I think that goes back to the first question, and it's very similar to the one that was asked by Aline earlier. And that's even interesting because that really touched on several different roles inside an agency. And, the account director really has a lot of responsibility for leadership for that particular brand. And I think when they are fully engaged and aware, they then help bridge the gap that may exist with other department heads. But then oftentimes different department heads have a relationship with different people within the client side. So, you may see the account director working with a certain person on the client side, but then procurement's talking to production, and then, so it's just really important, I think, for all parties involved to be aware of the efforts and what the goals are. And we normally try and have meetings at the beginning of the year with all parties to just kind of kick off our goals and objectives for that year.
We have another question from a participant today, and thank you for those remarks, Anita. As a new production company, how should you market yourself to advertising agencies? What are some best practices?
Wow, I think that's a really good question, and you're really in a tough spot too as a new production company. And I think the important thing is to really mimic what those people that are successful do. And I think they have reps that have relationships with the agency producers, and that seems to be very important. Again, and then it's kind of what kind of production company are you? Most of my comments are probably related more to commercial broadcast and the larger, but acknowledging that there are now with interactive, and there are maybe more opportunities for smaller production companies, but however the quality, and the reel has to be there. And then having, that stellar roster of directors with the individual reels, composite reels, not such a good reception, or it speaks to, the size of the firm. So really knowing what the agency is accustomed to seeing, being a member of the Association of Independent Commercial, I think it's producers or production companies is a good one. I mean, just those things that show that you are established and you have the credibility and are experienced in your field.
Great, thank you for that. Participant today would like to know, are there ever RFPs calling for diversity vendors other than government-related bids? If so, how do we make sure we receive these RFPs?
So RFPs asking for, again, not really sure about the reference to government, but I think the vendor may be, I'm not really sure if is that targeted to agencies or for advertising work or vendors that support the industry. I'm not really sure that I understood the question.
Well, I think this is from a diversity vendor, And the crux of the question is getting included in RFPs and getting included in a wider range of RFPs other than in government-related bids.
Right, and I think that it largely depends, Eileen, on the type of vendors they are. So agencies are sourced a certain way. I mean, there are search firms and there are certain processes. It's not a government, it's not the typical government process that companies go through when they're, or procurement process even, when they're searching for their agency of record. So again, I think, it's just important and incumbent upon us as vendors to really know what the means and methods are. And again, it's another sign of how experienced you are in the space. Because if you're a player, you pretty much know. And I didn't mean that to sound cold in any way, but it's kind of true nonetheless. And then if you're a company that supports the industry, well, then it's just really understanding how that agency's particular procurement or bid process, if you will. Any other questions, gang?
Oh, absolutely. I have one here, and the questioner, well, the participant says if you've already asked, then please forgive them, but it may help to answer again. How would you recommend an agency stand out in such a competitive industry when everyone is trying to get their foot in the door with top companies?
Wow. That's an excellent question, and I don't think I have answered that. And I don't know that I'm in the best position to answer that, as I work with general market agencies and not typically with vendors that are trying to get in the door with the client. But as it relates to looking for a partnership with a general market agency, I mean, it's what agencies are looking for, and typically, let me just start off by saying they're not traditionally looking for other agencies to partner with, because agencies of the size that we support, they can pretty much do what they do in-house, or they have it within their network. But when there are those times that they will partner with other agencies is when there are unique insights that they may not have for a particular piece of work that they're trying to get. And, I encourage all vendors, no matter what you do, to try and establish those relationships well before the time that you need it. Because it's, and I'm sure everybody's experiencing the fact that, the sales cycle is much longer than it used to be. But however, the lead time in terms of procurement seems to be really short when our clients are looking for people to support work that's already in-house and taking place. And the tendency is to reach out to people you know, people you trust, and people you have a relationship with. And so offering unique and different insights is key. And you're right, it is tough to be different now. But if you're in business for a reason, and there was something that you felt that you did better than anyone else, hopefully, which is why you started your firm. And I also encourage you to continue to reinvent yourself. It's just been my experience, and then watching and working with many of the different agencies and the vendors that work with those agencies, is that, the business is just evolving and changing so rapidly. And even though you may be smaller, it's really important and incumbent upon you to do the same and to really stay leading or bleeding edge, and leverage the fact that you're smaller to be more nimble and embrace maybe technology or new approaches a lot faster than your counterparts can.
broad question from a participant today. The question is, I have a group that was started over a year ago for minority businesses for networking. We're located in a city that hasn't focused on supplier diversity in the past, and now our demographics are changing. How would you suggest we have a better understanding to embrace supplier diversity and the strength of the market that diverse vendors bring?
And can you start the beginning of that question again, Eileen? I'm not sure I understood it.
Okay, the question. I have a group that was started over a year ago for minority businesses. We are in a city that hasn't focused on supplier diversity in the past. And now that our demographics are changing, how would you suggest that we have them understand and embrace supplier diversity?
Well, are they trying to get the city to embrace it?
I think the city and probably the businesses in the city community, city's business community. So it's beyond advertising as well.
Got it. Well, it's different. I don't know that there is. I mean, you can always talk about the importance of minority businesses, but your approach for government will be different than an approach for private sector. And so I don't know that this is probably the forum to best address that question, but it's always the argument about demographics and then kind of knowing who you're targeting, and it's difficult for me to answer that without knowing who the target is specifically. Because, what will interest Dell may be different than what interests Verizon or that interests, PepsiCo. So it's just, it's really hard to say other than, going in and talking about the charter of that organization.
Sure. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, are there any more advertising-related questions? And if not, Phil, we can turn it back over to you to close out today's session.
Anita, I
Yes.
actually wanted to jump in. I'm sorry. There was actually a good question, I think, at the very beginning, and we've had so many questions that it may have been lost. And if you did answer this, I apologize, but Gail asked, she said we're a small boutique WBE-owned ad agency. She has big agency experience with the Draft and Gray, and they've worked with Fortune 50 brands. She says, we are having a challenging time trying to partner, support big agencies. Any advice?
It's a really good question, and I touched on it a bit earlier. It is a challenge, and I think her name's Gail, right? It is a challenge because agencies, larger agencies, aren't necessarily looking for other agencies. I mean, as with any business, you're really not looking for someone that does the same thing that you do. You're looking for people to provide the goods and services that you're looking for to supplement it. But I always tell agencies, and I think I've talked with many others that are in similar roles, that at other agencies it's challenging because really there are more agency vendors than there are, it appears, any other type of vendor. And so we're often approached a lot by boutique shops. And I have just found that the best entry point is new business. And so, it's probably like needle in a haystack, right? Because agencies aren't really telling you what they're going after, but you can follow the trends in the Ad Age, Ad Week, and I would really court them from a new business perspective. If I had an agency, I would have relationships with all the new business directors. They would be well familiar with my capabilities and whatever my unique insights are, and they have to be unique and tailored to that specific agency in order for them to see you and view you as a valued partner. And I know oftentimes it's really challenging for us as business people because it's like how much information do you give up front in order to get the relationship, right? And so, recognizing that you may provide some insights that maybe get used. However, being able to get that relationship, if you can, will go a long way. I would definitely target those that have clients with supplier diversity initiatives. However, I don't think I would make that as my initial calling card to the agency as such. I really think it's really demonstrating how and why you are a good partner, for that agency. And it is going to be challenging. And most of your business is going to probably come from the corporate side, as they are the ones that hire agencies. And then, you're challenged, of course, with having the competition from the larger agencies. But there are some brands that really don't have the budgets that the larger brands have, and that some of the clients may be looking for someone to handle that brand. So it's really knowing, and if you're a WBE, I guess knowing, the CMO or particular brand managers inside that company, and that procurement person, should there be one that manages advertising. But there are a lot of relationships to manage. But I would definitely, for the agency side, try and use new business as my approach, because they win the pitch, then you are, part of the team.
Thanks, Anita.
You're welcome.
So we do have some extra questions, but I guess what we can do is I've actually been copying these questions, and Connie may have been doing that as well. So you can definitely take a look at these later and get back to people, because we are coming up on the 1 hour mark, and we'll probably have a drop-off soon. But I wanted to thank everybody for attending today. I want to apologize for those technical difficulties we had at the very beginning, but it sounds like everything got smoothed out and ran well. I do want to let everybody in the audience know that a recording of this presentation will be posted to our website as soon as tomorrow, depending on how long the upload takes, but definitely tomorrow, and most definitely by lunchtime tomorrow. And you can actually view that, as well as upcoming presentations and registration links for those presentations at www.aaf.org/fromthesource. I'll say it one more time. It's www.aaf.org/fromthesource. And we have links for registration for future web seminars. We've got presenter profiles. We've got archived presentations. You can find it all there. So like I said, I just want to thank everybody for coming out today, everybody who attended. We did have quite a good turnout, and I want to thank Anita, and I want to thank Tanya and Aline and Connie for helping out. And we will hopefully see everybody back here for the next presentation.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.